was alcohol, I think I may need to quit. We're live. Okay, good. We're talking about alcohol. How often do you drink?
One night a week.
Like one night a week, one drink?
Or
one night a week, I get absolutely shit-faced.
One night a week, one drink.
Okay,
maybe two.
One?
My wife, we go out and we have a margarita or whatever it is.
Or spritzer.
Yeah, like whatever she wants to have, I just have a drink with her.
You have a seltzer?
Yeah. No, she likes a margarita, but she always get me like multiple doubles. She'll get me like 2 doubles. Margaritas, like big ones, we go somewhere. So her deal is we have to go out and have one drink and be social somewhere, at least one night a week.
I can understand that.
Yeah. But the problem is when I don't know, I get up at 5 and I train at 6 and I don't do well with a hangover. And Matt, Matt Pollock, he is like a broken clock who's consistently like I'll sit there and I watch at my kitchen window and it's like 6 a.m. it goes and the light goes on. I'm like, Jesus, this guy never stops. So I just have a whole bunch of people that are depending me to be there that it doesn't facilitate me getting hammered on the weeknights.
You used to drink in college, I assume?
I did. I didn't drink as much as in college as I did when we got to the NFL. My first couple of years, we drank a lot.
I mean, I'd ask this guy, but I know you were drunk during training, probably some of the times. No comment.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Why don't you tell a story from the Philippines?
You know, there was a drinking time for most people. I was actually not a big drinker in the SEAL teams. I was I was all about getting bigger, better, faster, and stronger, and I put all my time into that. And I got a lot of harassment for not going out with the boys in the Philippines and all that stuff. It just wasn't my scene.
Yeah. Saves a lot of money, saves a lot of drama.
Yeah, it saves a lot of drama. It saves a lot of legal problems. I mean, the one night I did go out with the boys and get shithouse drunk, I ended up in a paddy wagon on my birthday, my 21st birthday. Yeah. That's a story we won't tell.
Probably not appropriate for this venue.
Well, I mean, the problem is when you have 3 kids and a wife and all these other things, like it just doesn't believe me, if we're going to go out, like I want to go out and have a good time and let's have let's try to drink every drink we can, but I got to kind of like pick my battles. Like, oh, St. Patrick's Day. Oh, it's a holiday. We got to go.
I'd say when my kids were young, like your kids' ages, I probably went 7-8 years without really a drink. I mean, like maybe a beer at like a kid's birthday party or something and that was it.
Yeah. Like if somebody comes over, like, oh, we'll have we'll go over to our friend's house. My buddy Thad's birthday, Thad.
Yeah, Thad.
So we'll have like a bottle of wine and I'll have a glass of wine or anything. But I end up eating. His wife makes these incredible charcuterie boards.
Yeah.
Oh. And I can't sit near because I'll eat the entire charcuterie board and then just want to go home.
That's the biggest problem with alcohol is
eating.
I'll be like, when I drink, I'm just like, eat that.
The big problem with weed.
Yes. Yeah. So they say.
But a good charcuterie board. You're talking like jam.
Meats, cheeses, like 6
honey.
different cheeses. Yeah. Like these various different almonds that are like coated and stuff.
Yeah.
That's my weakness. A good charcuterie board. Like that's how I know I got old. When I'm like, my weakness isn't anything other than like an amazing thing of chips and salsa or
chips and queso for me. Like I can eat my body weight in queso.
Charcuterie boards.
I think there was a point where it was probably around 30, 31, 32 where I'm like, oh, I just can't do this anymore. Where you drink until 3, training started at 6 and I'm like, I can't do this.
I was never that guy. I could never do that.
But I would push without drinking because kids at the time. And like it would just come on like 4 months, no drinking. I just look at my buddy. I'm like, I just got to go out and get shit faced tonight. Racing stripes down the van. And then I'd wake up in the morning. Guys would be like, are you good? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. They're like,
are you
remember
sure?
last night? I'm like, no. They're like, you don't remember throwing that glass across the bar? I'm like, I didn't do that, dude. Well, here's the video. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. All of a sudden, if you got to wake up with like that sick feeling of like, what did I do? Like, I don't want that.
It's an awful feeling.
We a couple years ago, I went out. We have a tradition on St. Patrick's Day, which is like first beer. So we find whatever bar opens first, and we're in line, and we usually like get the first beer. So in Philly, it was 6 a.m. So we would line up at 5, and we go to this place called Finnegan's Wake, and we get smashed by like 6:15, right? So here in Austin, we moved out here, like Newport Beach, or we'd go to Brennan's up in LA, would open at 6. But we moved here to Texas, they don't open. Like the earliest place opens at 8 or 9. And we went out and had a whole bunch of drinks. I was home by 10. My wife invited people over for a barbecue, and I laid on the couch and was out. At like 4 o'clock, she wakes me up. She's like, people are coming over. You got to fire up the barbecue. So I go outside. I'm out of lighter fluid. I can't get the barbecue started. So I go get gasoline. Right. Mind you, I'm still
This is a good idea
Dude.
after good idea.
Shouldn't be any place. I go outside, pour some gasoline. I light it. I'm not paying attention. The gasoline goes back into the can. I throw the can. It falls on my leg. I'm on fire. The can's on fire. Everything's on fire. I'm running around, jump in the pool. My daughters are like watching me outside, set myself on fire, everything on fire, jump in the pool. And they were like, wow. And then
America's Funniest Home Video.
Yeah. Like to this day, my daughter's like on St. Patrick's Day when you almost set yourself on fire and burned everything to the ground, like that type of drunk. And I'll be like, yes, that drunk.
Yeah, I had that moment 2 weeks ago, and I've actually my hip's feeling better, but I thought I screwed up my hip resurfacing. You know the top rung on a ladder where it's got the signal like "Don't step here."
Yeah.
Well, the string lights had broken off.
That's a challenge for quitters.
It is. I'm like, yeah. So
come on. It's mortal.
The ladder was next to our big oak tree from which the string lights. And so, I step up there. There's only 2. And it's not even the 2 seconds where the thing starts to wobble. I know it's going. So I sort of jump off, but not in a way that gets me out of harm's way. So the ladder hits the tree, comes back. I fall butt on the top rung, do a complete flip, and land up on my back. Just laid there for about 3 minutes. I'm like, okay,
did I
go through a mental checklist.
Yeah.
Am I in pain? Muscle. I got damaged my muscle. But guys, we've got Dr. Luana Marques.
Was there alcohol
today.
involved in this?
There was none.
Oh,
was
well,
none.
that's why I thought you were asking us if the alcohol stories, there had been alcohol involved.
But when you see it, you're like, yeah, I'm a SEAL. I got this. I'm like, yeah,
That's for non-athletic people.
Yes.
I
Like,
stayed at a Holiday Inn
I
once.
can stand on the top.
I'm a SEAL. I have qualifications to
Yeah.
stand. Warning labels don't apply to me.
So we've got Dr. Luana Marques, who is a associate professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. She's a big, what we call cognitive behavioral therapy. We're going to talk a lot about anxiety today. She has a new book called Bold Moves. And I often will take her approach versus medication, which is what I think you refer to that as psychotherapy medication.
Psychotropic.
Psychotropic.
Yeah.
Before we get to her, I think we've got, is she on?
Yeah.
Okay,
I think I'm on.
2 articles from Men's Journal. Luana, how are you?
I'm doing well. Nice to be here with you guys. I love the alcohol conversation and that labels don't apply here.
Yeah. We are often trying to limit the amount that we drink, yet this is not the best showing.
These are all unopened.
Well,
They
yeah,
I mean,
but they're also gifts when people come on. Like I've realized after about the age of 40, like when somebody brings you a birthday present, it's usually alcohol.
yeah.
And now I have like a liquor cabinet that's like overflowing to the point where I'm like, I just don't drink this much. But then you're also thinking like, people are like, oh, what do you get this guy? Get him alcohol. But then you're thinking like, how much do these people think I drink that they're bringing me all this stuff?
Which I got a
flask one time for Christmas, and I was very insulted. I was like, "What do you think? I'm an alcoholic? Like,
I got to just have a heater sitting on my hip at all times."
Like, you seem like an alcoholic on the go. Here's something for your car. I'm like, what do you think of me?
So, Luana, we're going to throw up 2 our recent articles from Men's Journal. Feel free to weigh in. So, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, this is in full swing. Zuck is training with UFC stars. There was a photo, and I don't know if it's in this this article. He's actually looking pretty good.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see the Team Lizard people versus Team Alien. So I think Mark's part of the Lizard people crew that live underground. The conspiracy that lizards run everything.
Yes,
he's part of that crew, and then I think Elon's probably part of the aliens. So
isn't Elon like 3 or 4 weight classes above?
There you go. There's the photo. He's actually looking pretty good.
Well, I mean, look at Zuck. I mean, but look, he's as big as I mean, the dude just fought this weekend.
Israel.
Yeah, no, not Israel.
I mean, Israel's not a huge guy. Israel's
No,
tall, but he's
but the other
like
guy is
180
God,
pounds.
I'm totally forgetting his name. But my phone's over.
So let me understand this. So they're fighting in a UFC venue.
No.
No.
Well, that's what it was pitched.
Why wouldn't they do that? That would bring in more fans than I think any other UFC fight.
I think Zuck has been training and is like, let's bring it. I don't know if Elon has been. I don't think he's in shape for it. He posted some pictures. He doesn't look like he's in shape for it.
No, he doesn't. But he's been training with some locals.
He went training with
Lex.
Oh yeah, he's been training with Lex Friedman
and
George St. Pierre and those guys.
Yeah, I mean,
let me tell you, dude. I roll with the best jiu-jitsu player in the world, Victor Hugo, and I don't think that I could go like, oh yeah, no, I train with these guys. Like, there's a difference between training with these guys and then them going out there to make money and kill some people.
Yeah, like I trained with Dean Lister, but I was like a 5-year-old girl to him. He could do whatever he wanted to. Like, I didn't get anything from training from him that I wouldn't get from training with somebody 20 levels below him.
Dude, I rolled with Victor and Shanji and these guys. Like, they're the best in the world. And oh yeah, they totally had me thinking I was doing pretty good.
Yeah,
like I was knee slicing, passing guard, and doing this. Yeah. And then Victor's like, "Oh, you're doing great. Keep going." And then
yeah, that's
it. It was like you're getting patronized.
Yeah, it was like super emasculating.
Dean would be like, "Yeah, keep pulling. Yeah, no, turn your hand a little." Yeah. I'm like, "All right, so
yeah, like you're never going to be able to armbar me in this. Hey, you want to do this? No." And then he's grabbing my hand. Get the choke rate. I'm like, God, so emasculating. So I mean, I'd like to see some footage of him. I mean, you can always, so when he went to Hawaii, I don't know if you saw this, but during COVID, he went and bought like 20 acres in front of the best surf spot in Maui. And then, and then he hired Kai Lenny and his crew to basically teach him to big wave surf and foil board. And it was something like, how much you want? $1 million? Okay. You and I crew $1 million, but done. And so everybody's like, why are you teaching this toad? And he's like, we work for Facebook. We're his personal surf instructors.
Yeah.
So he buys the best place, like right in front of, like they have to go on his property to get out to where they go. And he just hired those guys. And so I'm sure he just hired these guys too.
I'm sure he gets a lot of hate for that. The guy earned it.
Good for him.
The guy earned it.
Well,
I'm happy for him.
He earned the money that he's using, but I don't think he didn't earn the status of, like, I'm sure he's a white belt, right? And
I think he is a white belt.
And so why does he get any more status than any other white belt? Because he's rich and famous. That's why.
Absolutely. That's just the way the world works.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying he didn't earn anything in jiu-jitsu other than a white belt.
Well, but here's the difference. He's gone out and he's actually competed. He went and beat up some other pharmacists.
Yeah, I know. It was in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, like it was.
I'm saying another 100,000 white belts have done that this year, and none of them got any notoriety for it.
But I mean, I really appreciate the fact that he probably had a focus group go out and they probably asked 1 million people, what do you think of Mark Zuckerberg? And they were like toad, alien, lizard person. There was probably not.
What if he does jujitsu?
I'll
be an in shape toad.
What they figured is this focus group came back to him and they were like, okay, everybody thinks you're a weirdo. So what you need to do is do something that Joe Rogan high fives you. And if Joe Rogan thinks you're cool, you'll get a pass from everybody else. So he starts doing jits and MMA, goes on Joe Rogan and talks to Rogan about jits and this whole deal. And Rogan's like, this guy's pretty switched on. And he becomes a friend of Rogan and instantly gets the pass where now the world doesn't think he's an absolute weirdo. So I think
does he really care?
100%.
I don't care if you have $1 billion bucks.
Everybody
or $25,000 to your name.
Everybody cares.
Like I listened to his podcast with on Joe Rogan, and he legitimately cares. Like there was a very concerted effort that I need to do something that Joe. I mean, because why does Joe Rogan need to like co-sign on anybody? I mean, he calls bullshit on people constantly, and the fact that he was like, like it was one of those things that I wondered if he's like, okay, 2 years before I go on Joe Rogan, I need to start training so that I have something to talk about so he doesn't think I'm a complete Martian. That's at least the way I took it. And I was like, good for him.
Well, because Joe Rogan made that comment about him when he testified in front of Congress.
Yeah, about
when he does that drinking water thing. He's like, look.
And he didn't blink.
Yeah, he goes, that's a robot trying to pretend being a human. Like,
well,
and that's what he looked like.
He did that whole thing where he didn't blink, and they were like, he's an absolute robot or a lizard.
Yeah.
Luana, have you been following this whole Elon Musk and Zuckerberg potential fight?
She probably has important things.
She's probably like, I don't need to see two rich guys who are trying to prove themselves in some way, go out there and fight each other.
So the only thing I'll say is everybody cares about what other people think. I agree, but no, I'm not following it. I was just anxious about the whole training here, thinking this is a lot of work just to have people care about you, but okay.
Yeah. You know what? I think it'll draw a lot of eyeballs. I hope it ends up on UFC as one of the main cards. I think it'll just be comedy. My question is, are they allowing face like punches to the face?
I'd be so insulted as a UFC fighter
If that
got a top
yeah,
card.
I can understand that.
Like,
I can understand that.
Yeah,
I guarantee.
It'd be like, hey, Zuckerberg and Elon are going to start shooting. They're going to start doing CQC, and then they're going to go train with SEALs, and SEALs are going to get the back. Yeah, they're going to be the background, and these guys are going to be the best gunfighters in the world. So I'm like, come on, who cares?
I wonder if these guys would agree to like actually hitting in the face, or if this is just going to be a pure on the mat.
Oh, like a jiu-jitsu competition?
You just did a jits competition, or is this
Like
going to be
for
traditional
submission?
MMA? Yeah.
I know that Elon, he was a cage fight, which normally a cage fight's like,
Or MMA.
MMA.
Pit fighting.
But I know, I don't know. I haven't followed it all that close. I just know that the guys that I trained in the jiu-jitsu world were pretty fascinated by it, and they were interested to see like who people were reaching out to on it. So
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, like, what's the risk versus reward? Like, would you pay $100 to watch it?
No. On this one, I rarely ever pay pay-per-view. I think I would pay.
I wouldn't care.
It's going to be comedy. It's going to be comedy.
So the last UFC 290, I didn't pay for, and I was watching the clips, and I was sad I didn't buy it. It looked incredible. Like there were so many good knockouts, and so it was such a good fight. But I don't know. Like the last thing I want to do is watch two. What are they in their 40s? Like
Yeah.
with Zuckerberg's got to be in his 40s, right?
Yeah.
Elon's
Definitely well
Elon's
into
gotta
his
be older.
40s.
Yeah,
He
his
might be
40s.
in his-
So some
50 by now.
40-plus-year-old out of shape dad bods out there duking it.
Non-fighters
Non-fighters.
fighting. I was like,
I'm not interested in it.
Or is this like Game of Thrones where they can select proxies?
why don't we get
And
the
then two UFC
why don't we
guys
get
will-
two UFC fighters
This
to
one, he
be
will
the
fight
CEOs
them.
of their
who would you
companies?
select as your proxy?
Well, it depends. Who? I mean, are we going by weight class? Are we going by?
Well, they didn't have that in Game of Thrones. Remember, he got to pick the one dude with the sword got to go against the mountain. So it's just
And
proxy.
he lost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he did, but he was beating him until
Yeah.
So I mean, if you had to pick anybody in the world for your proxy, who would it be?
John Welbourn.
Dude, yeah.
Oh man, that's because then they can just counter select.
No. I think what happens is everybody
select.
gets to pick
Open.
privately, and then you show up and you're like, "This is who I selected."
I would select probably a AK-47. That's what I would go with. Let's throw up one more article. Luana, bear with us.
Do you know who I would select?
Who?
I would take Boss Rutan in his prime.
Interesting.
So I had lunch with Boss Rutan the other day.
No kidding.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, went to lunch. Harry Shaw knows him, so we went to lunch with Boss Rutan to try to get him to be guests on our podcast. And so
Did you get him, or is he going to come back?
No, we just went to lunch. We had an incredible lunch. He was like showing me combinations, telling me stories about how he broke this dude's liver. I mean, like he was the original MMA fighter. He's like the OG.
He was vicious.
Oh,
He was
the
a
best. And he
vicious
was talking
man.
about how he broke this dude's liver and how he knew that he could break a spleen. And he went on that thing. It was like it was some TV show where they were showing like deadly stuff. And they were like, "Do you think you can break a spleen?" He's like, "Yeah, I broke a liver. I can break a spleen." And he did this punch, and basically they like measured it, and he broke the spleen on the deal. But Boss was incredible.
Yeah, he was.
To the point where I was like, "You want to come on the podcast?" He's like, "Sure." I was like, "Well, I'm he's in New Braunfels, so he
that's
Cool.
cool.
LA.
he was, and then he during COVID came out and visited Rogan and like went down and checked out New Braunfels, and New Braunfels reminded him where he grew up in Holland. Because it's kind of like German, and there's this kind of German feel to it.
Ton of German influence.
Yeah, and he was like,
hence
"This is
the
great."
name New Braunfels.
So they moved to New Braunfels, and so he's local. And I was trying to get him to come up because I want him to mentor Victor and those guys, and just have like him around. And he needs it too, So he was like, came up, we went, and I was so I'm trying to plug him in with those guys. But he's like, "Yeah, do you want to do a podcast?" He's got this O2 trainer thing, and he's got a bunch of stuff. He's has some of the most amazing stories I've ever heard. Like things about like pride back in the day. And he was telling us the king of pancreas and the fighting. And just like, he was like doing these like blood matches I'm like 3 hours. I was like, "This is the best. Save it for the podcast." But yeah. So yeah, I would take Boss Rutan.
He's an icon.
Yeah.
He's definitely a founding member.
Yeah.
So this one, Tom Cruise did 1,300 practice jumps. 13,000. There is no way he's got 13,000 jumps. Where's he get that in? Because Nick Cush has 11,000.
Okay, so 13,000. How many jumps a day can you do?
be very generous and say you could do
6, 4 to 6, like
Yeah, I mean,
comfortably.
let's be crazy and say he could do 10.
1,300 days.
I do know
1,300
this.
days. No, that's
He
not
he
possible.
learned. Look up when is it Days of Thunder?
Yeah.
Look up what year Days of Thunder came out.
1989.
Is that what you're
I think
guessing?
it is. I think it's either it's 89.
He learned to skydive during Days of Thunder when they were out at Daytona.
Is
he
it right?
needed to land
It was 90.
90. So I mean,
Oh,
that's
well over those years. Okay.
but still that's
Oh,
a lot of-
in his whole life, he's got 13,000 jumps.
that's what I'm guessing.
Well,
that
because
they
the way
mean
I'm
by that.
reading that, he did 13,000 practice jumps.
Yeah, that's what I read.
Oh, to pull
But-
off
but
the
if-
biggest
but
stuff.
if
Okay,
he's
that
got
makes sense.
13,000 jumps over his life.
Okay, I bet you he
and
has
30
13,000 jumps because he's in his 60s,
That's
right?
34 years.
Well, he's
in
60,
50s.
isn't he?
I'm looking at guys that do this for a living, and like even guys that do it for a living are like 15 to 18,000 jumps.
Yeah,
Well,
but if they had their money to have their own plane,
Yeah.
have you
Yeah,
ever?
yeah, that's very true.
So did you look up how many flight hours he has? So
Because he's a pilot. Yeah.
yeah, he's a pilot, but like he has like at the end of Top Gun when he's flying that like World War II, that's his plane.
Yes.
That's his favorite plane, and he does like he's got a maintenance crew, and he does. I mean, like the story's incredible.
I heard a funny story
Scientology.
about him where he was telling a story about he wanted to do a stunt, and the stunt coordinators are like, Tom, we can't do that. And the story he's telling the guy to, he said, well, Tom, what'd you do? He's like, so I got a new stunt coordinator.
Yeah.
Until the guy said yes. But if Tom Cruise is listening, we would love to bring you on one of our expeditions or go skydiving in Nepal. So if anyone knows Tom Cruise, please connect us. We've announced, we just pulled the trigger on this Drop Zone Moab, 24 to 27 October. We're going to skydive into an unknown DZ in Moab into the river valley. 1 day of whitewater rafting, 1 day of off-roading. Wow. It's going to be fun. So we can't jump you in, but you can be waiting on the ground.
That's fine. I will gladly wait on the ground.
There is a system that can support you, but there's only like, I think a few of those systems. It's like the tandem heavy.
Yeah. What is it? You got to be under a certain weight. What is it?
Well, combined, now you're putting my knowledge. Basically, your weight and my weight can't exceed something like it's like 450 pounds.
So we need a really
450.
small person to jump me, and then that would be really scary.
Yeah.
And then they
Actually,
can't-
you
they
would be
can't
stable
control
as hell, though. If you had a good position, you'd be very easy to jump, but there is a tandem system.
No, I'll be on the ground.
All right. We'll coordinate that. It'll be fun. The whitewater rafting is class 5 anyway. So
Did you ever hear? Oh, which I've done. There was a cool story about Patrick Swayze on Point Break when they were basically getting those guys proficient to be jumping, and like I forgot the guy who was like the jump coordinator for that, but they had to get Swayze because you remember he's doing those flips in the air and he's doing all that acrobatic stuff, and he was I think like a ballet dancer. So the guy talks about they had to do like X amount of jumps before they started doing it. And he's like, Swayze, he's like, I showed him once, and the guy was basically just doing all these moves because he's like, oh, it's like doing ballet in the air, and he was a dancer. But that guy was like, probably one of the most like interesting, like had never skydived, and all of a sudden, X amount of jumps later, the guy's doing flips in the air. So
I'm totally not that guy. Nothing comes easy to me.
But have you seen? You remember in Point Break where they're doing all those like single, where they're spinning the pirouettes and then doing the flips?
He's actually got his head to like almost his knees.
Yeah. I mean, that was him. That wasn't a stuntman. So Swayze did all that.
We are pitching a potential TV show called Drop Zone Earth, and we had a conversation, and the lady who's pitching it to all these whatever production studios said, Mike, anything you want to say? I'm like, yeah, basically imagine Point Break with a bunch of special operations guys. And afterwards, she's like, don't ever say that again. I don't know who that offended, but I'm like, oh, okay.
Who doesn't love Point Break?
Exactly.
I am an FBI agent.
You pull. No, you
Dude,
pull.
we use that like the whole time where it's like, you hungry? Yeah, give me some tacos. You tell, give me 2. Like there's so many Point Break references that we've used just within daily vernacular that the fact that somebody was against it, I'd be like, whoa. I don't know if I can work with you if you're not a Point Break fan.
It's a classic. On Patrick Swayze, probably one of the most iconic skits ever is him and
Chris Farley.
Chris Farley.
Yeah, where they're Chippendale.
Chippendales. They're like, no, man, you were great.
They have since gone back and been like apologized for that. And they were like, oh, this was sham. I'm like, dude, first of all, that was the most amazing thing ever. When he's like, I don't think I can beat you. So he's like, I'm dude, like, I can't believe I beat you. He's like,
it was a tough decision.
He's like, was it the body? Yeah, it was the body.
All right. So guys,
2 great icons that we've lost.
we are going to transition over to mental health, which is, God, I want to say out of control without sounding unempathetic. I don't know where to go with this. Basically,
what are you saying
Luana,
There's an epidemic.
it's an epidemic of,
well, is it an epidemic,
Poor
or is it
mental-
just the fact that the media and social media has made such a notice of it that, like, it seems like such an issue, but maybe it's always underlining been there.
well, but Luana, mental health is a very subjective diagnosis, is it not? Or are there biomarkers you can identify to say, yes, this person definitely has mental health issues?
I mean, I think we're working on biomarkers. I don't think it's clear that we can say this is the biomarker and it leads to this disorder. What we can say for sure, though, is that people are hurting, right? The CDC is reporting 20 or 30% of Americans are having clinical levels of depression, anxiety. Now, was it there before the pandemic? For sure. But people are certainly struggling more. And I do think the media is talking more about mental health, which there's plus and cons. On the plus, I think we are aware there are more people struggling. There's more suicide. On the cons, I think some of the conversation doesn't bring science and real data into it.
So, Luana and I had a conversation earlier where we talked about if this is becoming such a prevalent issue within America, is always go to the source. Like you may not be able to cure this generation, but you can certainly prepare the next generation through. And I know, your focus is cognitive behavioral therapy, is starting to educate our younger generations on the techniques to minimize anxiety, stress, a lot of those issues. What strides do you see being made? And I know you work for Harvard and a lot of institutions where they're actually trying to educate either their staffs, their students, their people on how to better combat mental health issues.
Yeah, so, as a cognitive behavior therapist, I actually believe in skills and not just therapy. I grew up poor in Brazil with a single mother. And to be honest with you guys, what I learned first, it was sort of learning, you guys have been talking about this in this podcast, to approach discomfort instead of avoiding it, to go towards things that scare me. And when I got to graduate school and I realized there's science behind this, that's what we want to teach kids today, that instead of running away when they're scared, can we go towards things that make you scared in a way that doesn't paralyze you, right? But we've done this for 10 years here at Harvard. We've trained paraprofessionals in inner cities. So people with no training, working with young men coming out of prison, for example, how to regulate their emotions, how to, instead of shooting somebody, manage their anger. And we've seen that it works, that we can actually get somebody that came out of jail, instead of going back on the streets, to get 60% more likely to get a job by just learning how to regulate emotions. And I think that's what we need to be teaching people.
Would you say that that's, I know I'm mixing concepts here, but it's almost like progressive exposure therapy for life, right? So it's like it's not necessarily about an elevator or some phobia, but it's just like, we know that people always feel the fear. In progressive exposure therapy, you get them to keep doing it. They stay just as afraid, but they develop courage, and they develop tools to move through life with that, with that fear. And it sounds like what you're saying is sort of just like a general blanket of that across life. It's like, let's move towards the things that are anxiety provoking for us, or concerning to us, and we'll develop more skills and get better and better at that and be able to handle more and more stress.
Another way to say that is, is society becoming less resilient because we're safeguarding people from uncomfortable situations?
I think that we've made it okay to be afraid of things. Like that's, like I don't remember fear being okay growing up.
It is okay to be afraid of
Yes.
things.
Well,
It's
no,
just-
but
it's not okay to hide from
Yeah,
things that you're afraid
that's
of.
where
Exactly.
I remember there were bullies. Like I remember growing up, and like I remember there were bullies and the whole deal. And I remember my mom, like, talking to my mom about it. And she's like, well, you're either going to have to, like, you can either sit here and wait for it, or you can just go out there and deal with it head on and get in a fight and deal with it that day. So, I mean, like, the idea of like somehow hiding at home from your fears, I found that hiding at home just brings all your fears to your front door and knocks on it. It's easier to go out in the world and encounter them. But I wonder sometimes if we've gotten into a situation where now people are like, well, just avoid.
Well, I
these
think a lot
situations.
of the fears now are virtual, and those are easier to, put behind you and look at, distract yourself by looking at other things and not approach those things that are nagging at you. But I think we should talk to them.
Yeah.
No, I know.
This is their world.
Yeah.
No. I think you guys are all saying something very valuable. I think the first one is this: fear is biologically wired and we're going to have it. So we can't take it away. The question is it real fear or is it perceived fear? Is it something that we're creating that we think it's fearful, right? And I think this idea of exposure to a lifetime, we think about exposure therapy as just, I'm afraid of elevators or heights, but it's really this idea of what do we do when we feel anxious? And I think the three of you, in one way or another, are talking about if we avoid what's making us anxious, it's only gonna make us more stuck. And there is this idea today that we can avoid. And I think the problem is not anxiety. I think the problem is avoidance, is that we avoid and then we rob our chances of actually overcoming that fear and becoming our best selves, our stronger selves.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a very safe spaces. We often hear within universities now that they have safe spaces and I guess safe words. Is that
like your responsibility?
Is that a real thing?
Responsibility to avoid my triggers?
Yes.
Because if you ever say anything that makes me feel unsafe,
it feels like
your
it's
fault.
like we're perpetuating the problem, Luana.
Yeah. So I have a problem with that myself because I think that we are teaching people not to have conflict instead of actually teaching people how to engage in conflict in a way that allows you to overcome it. Right? We're responsible for our words, but I don't know what your triggers are. I really don't if I don't know you. So if I trigger you, I think it's reasonable for you to say, hey, Luana, that pissed me off. And can we have a conversation about it versus you can't talk to me about this. Right. I think in the general, I'm going to, in the day to day, this is different than somebody that knows somebody has a trauma history, for example, and is poking at them. That's very different. But in the day to day, I'm with you guys. We are teaching people to walk in eggshells instead of giving them skills to overcome challenges. And I think that's a problem.
And I mean, really the only reason to have a conversation is to expose each other to our thoughts, right? To think and be able to represent our beliefs and our perception of the world and the form of language. And if that offends somebody, and now I'm not allowed to express myself because some group has decided that that's offensive, well, that's their problem. But they're weakening the world by making it somebody else's problem, I feel like.
I agree. I think we have to be able to disagree in a respectful way and have opinions. Otherwise, how do we get to some sense of consensus about anything? It just becomes the split that we're seeing in the world.
Yeah, it just becomes ideology. Like this ideology is approved, that one's not. So if you don't have something to say along this ideology, you can't say anything.
Conflict resolution.
Yeah.
You have to be able to do it.
Out of all conflict comes some form of
have
resolution. War doesn't matter. So I read this. I thought this was very interesting. When compared to psychoactive medications, review studies found that CBT alone to be as effective for treating less severe forms of depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, tics, substance use disorders, eating disorders, and borderline personality disorders.
And insomnia, if that's not in there.
Insomnia.
It should be.
Like it's very, very powerful for insomnia.
100%.
So, I come from the only lens that I know. And when we get discharged, the VA puts like 17 forms of prescriptions.
Yeah.
From gabapentin to like you name it, due to all the ailments you leave the military with, or I should say due to combat.
We had the individual on the podcast, the pilot.
Kagan Gill.
Yeah. He talked about gabapentin being by far the most difficult to get off. And ironically, when my wife had her surgery, they prescribed her gabapentin and she has not, kicking the gabapentin, she hasn't been able to sleep. Like it's literally, and I even said to her, I'm like, it's a gabapentin. She's like, you have it in my head. I'm like, no, it's the gabapentin. It's not me in your head. But like, that's a tough one to kick. And I was going to ask Doctor a little bit, why is it? Because works on the GABA receptor?
Yeah, well, I mean, so gabapentin is really nothing more than a GABA molecule with a pentane ring that allows it to diffuse through membranes, get into the nervous system better. But anytime you're giving a super physiologic, I mean, obviously we produce GABA all throughout our body, and GABA is a neuroregulatory neurotransmitter. But anytime you go super physiologic with anything, like hormones or anything else, you downregulate receptors over time. And so now, if you have 1/10 of the GABA receptors that you had before you started taking this medication, and you have a normal amount of GABA, well, you have 90% deficiency in GABA because you don't have the receptors for it. And so that's why things like that need to be tapered off very slowly. And I believe nearly every medication should have an exit strategy when you prescribe it. I mean, that's my approach. I mean, and there are some exceptions. Maybe you're type 1 diabetic or something. Okay. But for most everything, there should be an exit strategy. And definitely I would say, and not that was given to her for psychotropic reasons, but it is a psychotropic drug.
I would say the pharmaceutical companies probably think differently.
Yeah, they would like you to take everything forever.
I mean,
well, I mean, is that a contributing factor to the rise in what we'd call mental illness? Is that the fact that these drugs are being prescribed so readily?
Yeah.
You come in and hey, I have these issues, and
that's
people
part of the lack of resiliency too, is that we're going to prescribe medication to get you through this problem instead of you working your way through getting to this problem.
Medication are not foundational habits, though. But what you're doing through CBT is trying to create foundational habits that allow people to cope when they know the symptoms are coming on.
Absolutely, Mike. I mean, I think the important thing is sometimes there's a need for medication. I think the pharmaceutical company can contribute to the problem, but I think there is a fine line, and there's a point that there is a need for medication. But the studies that you read, what we know is, imagine somebody is on CBT, and I put them on a pre and post MRI, and I look at their function MRI, and I do the same thing with Prozac. I mean, this study was done in the 90s, and you see that you can change the same neural pathways in the brain with Prozac versus CBT, right? The question is, CBT is hard, and people have to actually work hard to overcome their challenge. I mean, CBT for insomnia is incredible, but a lot of patients will take the easier path, which is a medication. But, I'm biased. I'm a CBT therapist. What I know is CBT is lifelong skills. It's not just about overcoming something. It's about being able to regulate your emotions, about handling the curveballs of life, is being able to sleep better. And to me, my job is to work myself out of a job so people can know what to do when they're hitting difficulty in life. And I think that's why CBT is so powerful.
Yeah, I don't know if you know anything about me, but I'm a physician, and I work with privately with clients, and I do sort of health optimization, performance type medicine for not really a disease-based model. It's just, what do you want to get better at, and how can we help you to get better at it? Pharma is a last resort for me, as I said, and there's almost always an exit strategy for if I do need to resort to pharma. But what my job really is, and my patients probably, or my clients wouldn't really like me saying this, but really what my job is a behavioral therapist, a cognitive behavioral therapist. Like, I'm getting them to optimize their lifestyle, because it's really exercise, nutrition, sleep, and stress mitigation that's going to do 90% of the health optimization. And then we can, there's a difference between ideal and reality, and we can use tools and tricks to mitigate that gap, to try to bridge that gap the best we can.
I'm so with you. I mean, anybody I work with, the first question is eating, sleeping, and exercise. If those three things are not under control, there isn't much I can do to help you, right? And then especially you have,
sleep.
Especially
the foundation
sleep.
For everything.
And then you have to face reality. And a lot of people that come don't want to face reality, but doesn't mean you have to like reality, but you have to look at your reality to change it.
Yeah, I agree.
And if you look at it's all in the trends. Obesity, diet, sedentary life. I mean, there's no reason to why mental health is increasing. And it seems like the shortcut, the quick is like, oh, I'm a little obese. Oh, Ozempic. I'll just get Ozempic.
Well, I mean,
like why get on a diet and fitness plan?
if you look at
Well, what if you did Ozempic and a diet?
if you look at it from a holistic standpoint, though, right? Like we know metabolic health is getting worse. We know physical health is getting worse. Metabolic health is getting worse. People are becoming less resilient, less fit, less strong, right? Why is it surprising that psychology would be any different? I mean, if you want to know what your body is going to look like 2 years from now, look at your brain. If you want to know what your brain looked like 2 years ago, look at your body, because your metabolic fitness is a result of your thoughts and behaviors, and vice versa. So it's all the same. It's all a continuum. It's all the same thing. I don't have a neurological system. That's a way we divided it so I can learn.
You mean the body doesn't exist in a vacuum? Like different parts, like my nervous system is different from this and this? Yeah. Developing a training nervous system.
It's just a musculoskeletal problem. It has nothing to do with my brain.
So I'm with you guys. This is so important though, because I love how you're pushing on this, because it's brain health, it's body, like it's all connected. When people are like, well, you have a mental health problem. Well, how is your body? Like, and why is it that we exercise our physical body so hard, but we don't spend any time exercising our brains and doing exercises that can strengthen our brains? Should be the same amount.
We stigmatized it. If your brain's not perfect, it's because there's something wrong with you. Like you're a flawed person, but it's okay to work on your fitness. But there's a stigma around not being able to handle stress as well as you'd like to, or to whatever, create a healthy narrative around anything in your life. Like there's a stigma to mental health.
Well,
there shouldn't be. I disagree with it, but
I think there's also becoming a victim category within mental health that people are willingly sort of stepping into that bucket, and they have no desire to.
No, I think there's a.
I don't know if I buy that.
Of saying all my psychological problems are caused by somebody else or something else, but not that. I don't think there's a lot of victim points, status points for saying I have BPD, for example.
No.
It's like, but there's a lot of victim status and saying, well, my parents abandoned me when I was 3 years old and left me in the woods for 2 weeks by myself. Now I have BPD. Right.
I'll just give you a good example. Jacob, who does our video for our podcast, he's overweight. And when I asked him why he was overweight, he was like, I made a lot of bad choices to get here.
Yeah.
And he firmly
1,000 bad choices.
Yeah. He is like taken ownership of all of those bad responsibilities. And I'm like, do you want to be less fat? Do you want to be in better shape? And he's like, 100%. He's like, do you think I want to be like this? He's like, this is bad decisions. I realize I make bad decisions. I need to start making good decisions. So he's got to show up and train 3 days a week. He has to give me food logs. He's lost like 60 pounds in the last 2 months that we've been working together.
Wow.
He shows up today and he's like, I know it's going to be awful. And he shows up on time. I'm like, how are you feeling? He's like, it's a lot better than being fat. Like he is, he is my textbook dude where he's like, no, nobody did this. I put the food in my mouth. Nobody forced me. I made a lot of bad decisions. And he's like, I want to make him right. And
you can't fix it if you don't have accountability, right?
Yeah. And he shows up and he's like, this is the best thing I ever needed to work for your company and to be in this. And like the guys come through, it's community, which when I looked at all the blue zones, I was fascinated by all the blue zones. There's really no common thread other than type community where there's accountability, people feel involved, they're able to be able to contribute later into life, which is a perceptual change of the world, right? When you have community around you, you view the world differently. That's different on your your whole limbic system, your whole stress system. All of that changes with community, and stress is really the cause of all disease, I think.
Well, I mean, Sebastian Junger wrote about that in the book Tribe, where Native Americans who went to serve in the U.S. military had lower PTSD rates than your traditional American civilians because they returned to the tribe, and the tribe wrapped their arms around them with a sense of community.
Talk to us about PTSD and CBT. I find that fascinating.
So I've treated PTSD with CBT for really 20 years now, and it's very successful, right? What leads to PTSD is the sense that something bad happened you couldn't control, and it will change two main things. It will change how you interpret the world and how you feel in your body. And so there's two types of treatment: prolonged exposure and cognitive processing therapy. You probably heard about both, but one of them is this idea of changing your belief system, really changing what you're saying to yourself. So you work on, something bad happened and it was my fault, what was it really your fault, right? So if you're working with somebody that was a rape survivor, did you ask to be raped? And how can you think about this differently? How can you change the future to be safer, or prolonged exposure, which is reliving it? What's really amazing about CBT for trauma is that in 9 to 12 sessions, you can give somebody their lives better. I've seen, lots of veterans. I've seen lots of women in the community who now are no longer jumping around. They're no longer, on fight or flight. So we can't erase what happened, but we can change how you relate to it and how you take control of your life.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the basic fact of life, right? Is that we're all going to get things we don't want all the time, and we're all going to not get the things we do want all the time, and it's our narrative about that determines whether or not that's a growth experience or, I don't know, disease causing experience or something that's minimizing us, diminishing us somehow, or if it's something that's making us stronger and better. And
Yeah.
I think that's, and that's what I know the most about with CBT. And my friend, I have, colleagues and friends that do it. And it's that reframing that I think is just an amazingly powerful tool. And I think a lot of community and religion is built around reframing, right? It's a different way of perceiving why things happen in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think changing the narrative is important no matter if you have trauma or not, right? We've talked about victim mentality, but, I grew up with a lot of trauma at home. My father was very abusive and, my mother took on a lot. And as a kid, at first I was like, okay, it was my fault. I hadn't done enough. And now as a professional, I understand that I couldn't have done anything. What I could have done and have done is to change my narrative and ensure that I have what's known as post-traumatic growth. I understand that experience happened. It doesn't control my life. And I'm going to now teach people how to overcome that experience. And I think that's really how we have to manage those challenges in life.
It was just on Fox News, and I spoke about post-traumatic growth and how people that can embrace it and understand it actually understand that they can be better human beings in that they're in full, maybe not full control, but they're in control of the majority of their faculties and agency of the choices they make, no matter the situation.
And you don't have to be broken to get better. You can
That's
just
it.
be like, hey, this is suboptimal the way I'm processing this, and I can do it better, and I can get more growth out of it. I can get a better experience out of it, without having to say, well, I'm tragically flawed person because I'm feeling bad about this.
Well, I mean,
Exactly.
a lot of this perception. The one thing, and Doc, I joke that I joined or I adopted a bunch of Brazilians, and that I work with a bunch of professional Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighters. And these kids are in their 20s. They're from Brazil. They came here and they're like, I can't believe how much opportunity is here.
Yeah.
Like if you just work hard and continue to be consistent and I mean, they're all everybody's hardworking, no complaining, they show up. And when everybody kind of rips on that generation, I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's just the people that we're around because these kids are this same age, 23, 24, 25, and they are absolutely workhorses.
Well,
They
you know what I call that?
and they're they're so positive, respectful, come over, everything's great, and they're just so ecstatic for the opportunities presented to them that they are willing to walk over hot coals for anything.
So a few points on that. One, they come with a different perspective because we're all a product of our experiences. They grew up, they saw abject poverty. I mean, poverty on a completely different level than the United States. Not to say that there's not people struggling here in the United States. So they have a different perspective, which I think a lot of Americans lack. But the whole generation thing, I call this the generational game. And it finally hit me when, and I don't want to get specifics, basically came in and some guys that were our age in the military were bagging on the next generation behind us. And as they're talking, I sort of tune them out. And I realized, and I finally said to him, hey, what did the Vietnam generation say about you guys? A bunch of wimps and you're not hard. And
we do that for every
generation. This generation's great.
I trained with the Vietnam guys, and I am a wimp compared to this. So I don't see any problem with that. Can you tell? I think it'd be great for the audience, anyone listening, to know, like, how does somebody find someone like you to work with and know that, that you have the right bona fides and the right sort of approach to mental health, where you're not trying to make a victim out of them. You're not trying to put them on medication. You're not trying to get them to cry on your couch. It's like, hey, I'm here to make you stronger. Like,
Doc, that's what we do at your couch. We just cry on your couch.
It burns.
It's called the crying couch.
That's because of the roofies I give you. So can you just explain that for the lay audience, like, how do you find somebody with your skill set and your approach?
I think it's a really important question. So let's do two things here. First is, like, I think we've been talking about cognitive behavior therapy as if everybody knows what it is. And my experience is that the layperson have no idea what cognitive behavior therapy is. And in fact, they believe it's just talk therapy. And then you're just going to go talk to somebody. And so let's just define the terms, which is, cognitive behavior therapy is an evidence-based treatment that is really designed to teach you that a situation happens. And whenever that happens, it affects what you say to yourself, how you feel, and what you do, right? So you walk in an office, somebody gives you a look, and you go, oh my God, they're pissed at me, your heart pounds, and you walk away, right? CBT teaches you to change your thoughts, to approach instead of avoiding, and to live a values-driven life. And so how do you find a CBT therapist? How do you know? The first thing is knowing what CBT is. The Anxiety and Depression Association of America has actually a Find a Therapist link of evidence-based therapists. So it's a good place to start. But the last thing I'll say about this that I think it's really important is the same way you wouldn't go to a cardiologist and let them open up your heart without checking their credentials, or so I hope you wouldn't. I wouldn't. I would want to know that cardiologist is really a cardiologist and it has actually done that kind of surgery. I think as a potential client, you need to actually interview your doctor and say, have you seen this before? Imagine you had a panic disorder. Have you treated panic before? How many panic patients? How long do I be with you for? What is the expectation of outcome, right? And so I think it's knowing what it is, identifying a professional and interviewing them, because there is a match here a little bit. Like, for example, you guys probably got this already, but I tend to be on people's face when I'm working with them. I don't take no for an answer, and we're going to get to the finish line no matter what. If somebody doesn't want to show up, I'm not a good therapist, right? And so if they ask me if we're just going to talk, well, I'm not the right therapist. In fact, somebody called me one time and I said, what do you do in therapy? And I said, I make people feel comfortably uncomfortable. And they're like, well, I just want to be comfortable. I said, well, then fire me now because it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
so
I want you to get rid of all the fear in my life or something like that.
Can't do it either. Well, I want to lose weight, but I'm not going to exercise. Well, sorry. It's not going to work either.
Ozempic.
Yeah, Ozempic.
The wonder drug. Well, no, Luana, I can't thank you enough for joining us. I hope if anyone's listening, they can take this approach to dealing with the anxiety and stress, which we all have, which is just part of life, and develop the mechanisms, as you said, to deal with that, to process and learn to respond, not react. I know we're going to be doing a podcast shortly after this. I'm looking forward to that. And fellas, final thoughts.
I'm happy that the stigma of mental health has kind of been removed. I remember, growing up and, kids obviously having breakdowns, whatever. And it was very like hush hush. I feel like now it's a lot more in the forefront, which makes it more okay. But I also wonder now if it's like people are searching for it, like, oh, maybe I have this too. So I don't know. But I think that, a treatment plan or, plan of attack like the cognitive behavioral therapy is a lot better than just better living through pharmacology. Let me just medicate you until you're a potted houseplant, full of Thorazine and all that. So I do like the proactive approach.
I think that's I think that's one of the reasons that we over medicate for ADHD, ADD. Like one, I think that if you look at the symptomatology of ADD and you look at the symptomatology of chronic insomnia or chronic sleep deprivation, those are indistinguishable. So I think that's a big component in our school age children because of the way we start schools and all the other stuff. But I think, and I'd love Luana's input on this, but I've always felt like you're giving people these really powerful stimulants to cause a little bit of euphoria and a little bit of courage that wouldn't ordinarily be there.
Have you ever taken Adderall?
I have. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
I saw the look on your face.
I mean, I felt like I was bulletproof and Superman and like much smarter than I am and much more confident than I am. And I was like, yes, I can do anything. And then, the next day I was like, good thing I didn't try.
Hold on, let me get more of that.
It sounds like Limitless. Jesus.
Every time I've seen that movie, I've been like, where do I sign up?
Seriously.
Yeah.
Somebody told me, I'll pull the name of the drug, but they're like, this is
wanted
as closest to Limitless as you get. Starts with an F. Go ahead.
I wanted her input on.
No, I think you're
Do you
right.
think the stimulants you think that's one of the reasons that the stimulants are overprescribed?
So I think we are prescribing without looking at the whole human being. I think they're kids for sure. They need it, but it's not the majority of kids. And what we know from CBT is if it works as good as drugs, can we start with CBT and see if it works? Can we teach a kid to sleep better? Can we regulate all those things? And then if it doesn't work, then go to the medication. Right? It doesn't have to be. We don't have to stay away from it, but it should be a very careful approach. I agree.
Yeah.
I'm just fascinated with the fact that we as a society are not smart enough to revamp the education system, both public and private, to start including this with children. In a sense, we teach civics, we teach arithmetic.
They got rid of civics.
Unions. That's union.
Yeah, that's
right?
That I don't know.
It's all politics.
You're also
It's
trying to,
impossible.
effectively turn around an aircraft carrier. I mean, think about
Which takes
in Texas alone, there's 360, 380 school districts
Mhm.
that are all independent school districts that have a different idea on curriculum and setup.
I can give you a great example. There's this organization, nonprofit called Start School Later, and they have funded research and just also curated other people's research. But there's been tons of studies where you take, say, like 10 private schools, and you say, we're going to push their start time back an hour, just that. It should be 3, but we're going to push it back an hour. The students will have far less truancy, far less behavioral problems. They will have far fewer sport injuries. They will have they will have higher GPA. The entire class, the entire average will be higher GPA. And every school that they studied this had the best sports performance of any year they had ever done this. And the reason we can't move this into public schools is because of the busing system. And it's like all the busing system is set in place, and it has to, the bus has to have to come before the parents go to work, and this and that, and like this contract. And if the bus drivers have to drive at this time, it shifts all this, and it's way too expensive. That's the answer. It's way too expensive.
So I'm assuming the primary factor there was they were getting more sleep.
Yes.
And they were only getting an hour more
Shocker,
sleep.
doc. And more sleep, and you're a sleep doctor. Everything is all
partially sleep aids.
Yeah, it's like, your hormones are bad, sleep more. You have a bad life, sleep more. You want your car to not break down, sleep more.
Life hates you, sleep more.
Okay,
how does that work?
It's true. It's true. It's
The
a
one, if you
terrible
didn't
sales
know.
pitch, but it's true.
He's got Doc Marques.
No,
They're actually great.
I think
take
you're
it.
right. I'm sorry, but I've been trying to get stuff in schools for so long without a federal mandate that mandates it and puts money behind it. It's a mute conversation.
Here's what I refuse to accept: turning an aircraft carrier around. And for those that don't understand, it takes a while for a nation that defeated 2 major empires on 2 major fronts. There's a lot of things that we can solve if we truly cared about them.
Where,
Yep.
over 100 years ago?
Talking about World War II, but-
Yeah, I was saying
Yeah.
World War II ended in 1945, right?
Yeah.
So
and we had to.
So it's 80 years.
what I'm saying,
And we also had to drop a bomb on Japan to break their back. I mean, 2 bombs, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I mean, so we basically unleashed probably the closest, most savage thing ever produced on this planet twice on people to break the back. And that was the last time we won something.
which Oppenheimer
it's
coming out. That's going to be an interesting.
I'm so excited to see it.
I know. So am I. They've got a cast. What I'm saying is, the biggest hurdle to integrating this or implementing this within schools is politics and unions. I have no doubt, but it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Is to start emphasizing the soft skills that kids don't teach or get in current education. But then again, who's qualified to teach it? that's a big problem.
Well, I don't think that's a big problem. I mean, my research has proven that I can teach paraprofessionals how to teach the skills.
Yeah.
So I actually, it's just a matter of the country wanting and believing. And I'm going to push back, Mike. I don't think it's soft skills. Like, we're talking about regulating people's brains so that they can actually learn, right? Because when a kid's sitting there scared, they can't actually learn. And so it's just basic brain biology 101, teaching them about their brain and regulating emotions. And I agree with you. If you cared about it, we could do it.
And what I mean by soft skills is also teaching attributes, leadership, things along those lines that will serve people as equally, if not more, than a college education.
For sure.
The ability to communicate, to articulate,
No,
to reason,
I like
conflict resolution.
Well, I mean, you have to remember, and I actually know this on from doing my master's work at Berkeley, the school systems are not designed for critical thinking. It's Henry Ford, let me design a school system or mode of thinking so I can develop factory workers that can plug in with cogs. It's rote memorization. I remember after why I hated high school so much, and I got to college where I'm like, wow, critical thinking groups, projects, like it was one of those things. When we came to Texas, I went to the public school, I talked to the teacher, listened to what they had to say, what the curriculum and all this, and I put my kids in a private school where it was critical thinking, small groups, project-based, and everything, because I know exactly what the failures of this, because I used to write evaluate grant proposals for charter schools. I mean, the school districts are designed and the curriculum is designed not to create critical thinkers. It's cogs for
to include higher education in a lot of.
We teach people what to think, not how to think.
Yeah.
And the education.
Indoctrination.
And then we test them on it. We test them on, hey, you have to memorize this information.
I remember in medical school giving them the answer that they wanted and knowing that it was bullshit. Like, this is not true.
I did that in high school.
What you want. Like, I don't pass if I don't say this. But
it was like, read a book and then
Yeah.
tell us what the book said.
Right.
It's like, well,
Yeah.
what? Like that seemed ridiculous to me. I'm like, well, what's the book trying to say? What's the argument? I'm like, what is this? What's Catcher in the Rye trying to teach? Not necessarily who Alden Caulfield is.
Right.
So I hated high school. And then all of a sudden I went to college, went to Berkeley, and was like, this is great. Like, I could stay here forever and do this.
That requires a teacher to be a facilitator without trying to interject or indoctrinate.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of teachers that are activists now.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, think about one of the other issues we ran into at public school is, and I know this is a bigger issue, but I remember first grade, and I remember this clear as day. Very first day of first grade, we got a picture that we had to color. Day two, we came in, we had to hand it in, and the teacher went around and took everybody's, oh, it's a nice picture, and hand it back. The kid next to me just took a red crayon and did this on his, handed it in. The teacher gave this look, took him up, and basically took him to a different class. And he was in a slow class, not our class. And the idea was that we can't, sacrifice these 30 kids for the one. And then people sued, and it became an issue. When I went to, went to the parent teacher conference, I'm like, based on what you told me day one with like the curriculum, the rubric, you guys are way behind because I'm helping the kids with their homework. And she's like, well, we have 40 kids in the class. We have 3 to 4 behavioral issues that are taking roughly 80 to 90% of my time. And your daughters are doing great. They're totally fine. They can work by themselves. They can do this. And I thank you for going home and working with them every night. And I'm like, so wait a minute.
You just homeschool at that point.
Well, no, that's what we did. We looked to do. But then I found a private school that was, classes of 10. I could be involved in the curriculum. I know the teachers. They have I show up. We talk. My wife and I are involved. And I told them, I was like, this is what I want. Like, this is the direction I want my kids to go. And they were completely receptive for it. So I was able to find a solution. I mean, financial means help that. I mean, I'm sorry that the other people have to wade through whatever that is, but I'm not gonna, not give my kids the best.
Sacrifice your kids for
no
the whole
yeah. It's like I'll go out and work harder just to pay for it. But I mean, the problem is if I didn't know better. But when I went to Berkeley and then did my master's work, like this is what I focused on, and to see this happen in real time, I was like, man, I'm not gonna. I'm not going to wade through this, but like the issues, like with the behavioral issues with kids, like kids just screaming and the teacher trying to calm them down. And I'm like, back when I was there, they just put those kids in a different class.
And this is why homeschooling's on the upward trend, right?
Yeah.
Is people can control.
And people are also doing homeschooling pods.
In that ideology
pods where they'll have like 3 or 4 or 5, 6 kids in the
Yes.
neighborhood, and then they hired. We looked at doing that during COVID. Or you have a guy like Rob Wolf who homeschools his kids and is probably better than anybody.
Yeah, I've heard that if you homeschool, the school's curriculum only takes about 2 hours a day to teach your kids because there's so much crap.
So if you send away
built into the school.
Yeah. So when we were during COVID, when they shut the schools down, we sent away and I got their whole curriculum. And when I went through the curriculum, I interviewed a teacher, and I was roughly like 90 to 120 minutes. So like the teacher was going to come at like 9:30, 10, and they'd be done by noon. And then we had to figure out what to do. So like a big part of it's just warehousing.
Yeah.
So like the parents have to go to work. They don't have childcare. So they have to warehouse the kids from like 8:30, 9 o'clock to like 3 to 4 is like just the warehousing time. And they call it warehousing. And they were like, well, if you don't have to warehouse your kids, we can get this stuff done in 90 minutes. And I was like, man, but the thing I worry, in those groups, like I think one of the greatest things that I learned in college was one of Socratic method, which a lot of my classes were, which is like you got to stand up, and if you didn't do the work, they sent you home that day with like you were absent, leave now. And then you get 6 of those and you all of a sudden like get an F. So Socratic method was extremely motivational, but also working in small groups and having to contribute and do this, like that piece was fundamental. So the part I worried about with homeschooling is that they wouldn't learn that aspect of working in small groups with other people.
Well, Socratic method is what I think the foundation of coaching and mentoring and creating future.
And also being a rhetoric major.
yeah, by nature.
Yeah.
But creating leaders or children who can stand on their own 2 feet when you're gone, fail, rationalize, and
work through disappointment. Big complex thing.
Well, Luana, thank you for joining us. For everyone, we will be back again. Kirk, John, as usual. Thank you, man.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Obrigado.
De nada. Ciao.
So.